day 4 of prep week. As you know, today being day 4, we're going to take our time working our way through yesterday's set of questions, the Wednesday sample questions, go over these answers and make sense of all this so that you are better prepared for what's coming in a couple weeks here. So without any delay, let's jump into question 1. All right, so we're dealing with Galaland today in question 1. And we're going to start with parts A and B first, separate those out, as well as part C. So Galaland produces 3 final goods: bread, water, and fruit. The table above shows this year's output and price for each good. So as always is the case with these types of questions, the prompt is going to tell you things you need to know. And in this case, the prompt is referencing a table. Stop for 10 seconds and digest and interpret in your mind these. What is the table telling me? What are they showing me? They're telling me for this particular nation, Galaland, here's the output. This is what they produce. Here's how much it costs at that year's values, at that year's dollar prices. Part A asks you to calculate this year's nominal GDP. All right, so what is nominal GDP? That is current dollar GDP, current dollar output. So what it's asking you to do is simply calculate how much was being produced in current dollar value for that particular year. Remember, when you see calculate, you've got to show your work. So in this case, we're simply taking the output for each product, bread, water, and fruit, multiplying each one by their price, adding those numbers together, and you get $5,000. The 400 loaves of bread times $6 per loaf, 1,000 gallons of water at $1 per gallon, and 800 pieces of fruit at $2 per slice of fruit. That comes out to 5,000. So that's your nominal GDP. Part B. Assume that in Galaland, the GDP deflator, the GDP price index, is 100 in the base year and 125 this year. Calculate each of the following. The inflation rate expressed as a percentage between the base year and this year. All right, so again, it said calculate. We've got to show our work. I'm jotting this down just as a reminder. You may do this on your scratch paper when you're taking the exam. Remind yourself how to do these calculations. This, as inflation, this is simply percent change. So percent change is new minus old over old. Take the new number, in this case, the new index number, subtract it from the old number, divide it by the old number, multiply by 100 to get the percent change. So 125 minus 100 divided by 100 times 100 gives you 25%. Again, got to show your work, and the best way to do that is to show how you set up the equation that you're using. All right, the second part of B, calculate this year's real GDP. So again, if I've got my scratch paper, I'm going to remind myself, how do I calculate real GDP? It is the nominal GDP divided by the price index times 100. That's going to give me real GDP. So in this case, I had a nominal GDP of $5,000. The price index that year was 125. So 5,000 divided by 125 times 100 is going to give you a $4,000 real GDP. Part C. Since the base year, workers have received a 20% increase in their nominal wages. If workers face the same inflation that you calculated in part B1, what has happened to their real wages? Explain. All right, so their nominal wages, that's what they're being paid, obviously current dollar value. So they got a 20% bump in their nominal wages. They're being paid 20% more than they were the year before. However, we just calculated that prices of goods have gone up 25%. We've got to put those things together to get our answer. The answer is that real wages decrease. The word explain is there, so that means I've got to give some causal relationship. I've got to show the logic behind why real wages decrease. Nominal wages rose by only 20% as compared to the inflation rate of 25%, causing a 5% fall in real wages. So the fact that prices were rising faster than nominal wages tells you that real wages, essentially a measure of purchasing power, real wages have actually fallen, in this case, by 5%. All right, again, don't ever forget that word explain means I've got to come up with some causal relationship. I've got to show, I've got to illustrate in words here. I've got to verbalize that causal relationship. All right, let's move on. Part D. If the GDP deflator in Galaland increases unexpectedly, would a borrower with a fixed interest rate loan be better off or worse off? Explain. Okay, once again, stop and interpret the question. What exactly are they asking you? What I hope you got from this is that they're saying, we have unanticipated inflation. That's essentially what it's asking. The GDP deflator increased unexpectedly. We have unanticipated inflation, and it's asking, you have a borrower at a fixed rate loan. Are they going to be better off or worse off as a result of that? That's the only thing we're considering, is that the borrower with a fixed rate loan, when inflation occurs unexpectedly, are they better off or worse off? And then explain. The borrower is going to be better off. Okay, this is one of the I guess, unintended results of inflation that we have discussed throughout this term or throughout this course. The borrower is going to be better off. Explain why. Due to the higher inflation, the borrower is paying back the loan using fewer real dollars. And if you ask me, the key to this answer is that word real. You don't have to be verbatim with the scoring guidelines. You don't have to be exactly what the rubric says, but you have to make a reference here to the real value of the money they're paying back. For example, a very common missed answer here would be to say that the borrower's paying back less. If you just stop right there, that's not true. Now, if you say less real dollars, of course, that's fine. But if you say less, that's not true. Their nominal payments have not changed any. You've got to be clear in what you say. And a grader's not going to give you credit if you just say they're paying less. They're paying back the same amount, but the value of what they're paying back has gone down more than expected. And that's why they're better off. So the dollars they're paying back are worth less than what they had borrowed and what they had planned on paying back. That's why the borrower is better off in this case. Part E, identify an open market operation the Central Bank of Galiland could implement in order to lower the inflation rate. All right, so again, zero in on what you're trying to answer here. You've got to provide an open market operation. So we're dealing monetary policy, specifically open market operations, and we're looking to lower the inflation rate, which means contractionary. There's only one possible answer to that: sell bonds or sell securities. That's the only thing you could have said. Because again, you have to be specific to open market operations. Very common missed answers would include just saying contractionary monetary policy. That doesn't answer the question. Decreasing money supply. That does not answer the question. And of course, referring to other types of monetary policy does not answer the question. You've got to say sell bonds or sell securities. Part F, indicate the effect of the open market operation that you indicated in Part E on the following: money demand and nominal interest rates. Explain. All right, so there's no explain attached to money demand. All we have to do is indicate the change. There is no change. Monetary policy is going to affect the money supply curve. It's not going to affect the money demand curve. For part two, for me, again, if I'm taking this exam, even though there's no graphs to be submitted, I'm going to draw the graph anyway. So on my scratch paper that I'm going to have with me during the exam, I'm going to draw the graph and I'm going to visualize what happens to nominal interest rates as a result of the monetary policy. So I went ahead and put it on here. Again, take note, you don't have to draw it to answer this question accurately. You don't have to submit any graphs at all, but it helps to visualize what's going on. That's the whole point of learning graphs, is that we can visualize concepts and therefore understand them better. So in this case, money supply is going to shift left. There is no change in money demand. Nominal interest rates are going to increase. And really, by drawing that graph and visualizing what's happened, you give yourself the explanation. Due to the decrease in money supply, nominal interest rates will rise. We're moving along that money demand curve, pushing nominal interest rates up. Finally, part G, identify how the change in nominal interest rates identified in part F2 will affect the following in Galiland. Interest rates are going up. It's good to remind yourself of that. This is an identify question, so when it comes to price of previously issued bonds, no explanation is needed because it's not asked for. I can simply say decrease. We know that there's an inverse relationship there. So as interest rates are rising, the price of previously issued bonds is going to fall. It's going to decrease, and that's all you have to say there. It's an identify. It's an assertion point. For part two of G, economic growth rate, explain. There's that word, explain. Now we have to provide some explanation, some causal relationship. So first things first, economic growth rate is going to decrease. We had an increase in interest rates. The economic growth rate is going to decrease. I need to be able to explain that. The increase in interest rates will decrease investment spending, leading to a decrease in capital formation and the rate of economic growth. Key phrase there, capital formation. That's your link. That's the link between that short-term change in investment and that long-term decrease in the rate of economic growth. It doesn't have to, again, specifically be that word, but it's got to be a reference to that. decrease in capital accumulation, decrease in production of new capital, something to that extent. That is your link between a short-run investment change and the long-run change in economic growth. So again, know that term. That's why I underlined it for you. Know that term and be able to use it accurately. Okay, that's question one. Let's move on to question two. Question two, we're going to go to Meek Land, and we're going to track a few things about the economy in Meek Land. So let's start with the first two parts, parts A and B. Assume the economy of Meek Land is in a long-run equilibrium with a balanced government budget. Again, stop and process that prompt. They're telling you this for a reason. We're in long-run equilibrium. What does that tell you? It means output's at full employment. It means that resources are being utilized efficiently and sustainably. And we have a balanced government budget. Currently, spending is equal to revenue. All right, part A. Consider the PPC for Meek Land. Is current output on, below, or beyond the PPC? Well, if we're in long-run equilibrium, we should know that current output is on the PPC. Part B, assume consumer confidence falls. Identify the short-run impact of the change in consumer confidence on each of the following in Meek Land. All right, so the first one is aggregate demand. And what you've got to do is run through your AD shifters and say, okay, what they gave me here, the prompt they gave me, can I connect that to any of my aggregate demand shifters? Well, your shifters are CIGNX, consumption, investment, government spending, net exports. The first one out of the box, consumption, consumer spending. A less confident consumer, they're less confident about future income. They're worried about the future state of the economy. They're not going to spend as much money. So with the decrease in consumers' confidence, we have a decrease in consumer spending. Aggregate demand is going to shift left. We have a decrease. So again, I'm drawing the graph. I'm taking this exam. I've got my scratch paper. I'm drawing the graph because I want to see what's happening. And by doing that, I'm going to actually give myself the answers to a lot of questions. So AD is going to shift to the left. And as a result of that, you can see essentially a domino effect. Price level is going to decrease. It's right there on my graph, PLE down to PL1. Output, decrease. I went from YE to Y1. We started at full employment, but now we're below full employment. We have a recessionary gap now. As a result of the decrease in output, employment also decreases. Unemployment goes up, employment goes down. With a decrease in output, less output being produced, less workers are needed, people are going to be let go. So once again, you're not submitting graphs, but I do recommend you draw some graphs, and I've got a few more coming. Draw some graphs to help you as you work out and process the answers to these questions. Part C. On a correctly labeled graph of the short run and long run Phillips curves, would the fall in consumer confidence cause movement along the SRPC down to the right, up to the left, a rightward shift of the SRPC, or a leftward shift of the SRPC? Explain. Note something here. There is an explain point, but this is practically a multiple choice question. And that's a possibility that could happen, that in turning a graph question into a explain question, you might be given options. And that's not uncommon. That's happened on past exams as well. So in this case, what's going to happen here? We're going to move down and to the right along the short run Phillips curve. And to explain that, again, connect it back to ADAS. We had a leftward shift of aggregate demand. That's going to cause unemployment to rise. It's going to cause inflation to fall. And as a result, here we are on the short run Phillips curve. We're going to move from point A, which was our long run equilibrium, down and to the right to point B, where the unemployment rate is higher and the inflation rate is lower. Again, I like to use that visual and see what's going to happen. And to answer that question, it helps me to sketch out that Phillips curve graph and just think through what's going to happen here. Something else you want to do when it comes to the Phillips curve, again, you should always be able to connect it back to ADAS. In this case, because it was a shift of the aggregate demand curve, you're going to be moving along the short run Phillips curve. Had it been a shift of SRAS, then we know SRPC would also shift, but in the opposite direction. Just commit that to memory, be ready for that, because that's a common use of the short run Phillips curve. Okay, that's part C. Moving on to part D. If the government and the central bank do not pursue any discretionary policy change, how does the fall in consumer confidence affect government transfer payments in Meek Land? Explain. All right, so now we have no policy coming in to bring us back to full employment. We know that there was a decrease in consumer confidence, that decreased output, increased unemployment, people are out of work. How can I connect that to transfer payments? Transfer payments are going to increase. Why are they going to increase? You have more people out of work. Those people are going to apply for and qualify for unemployment benefits, unemployment compensation. So as people are applying for those government benefits, such as unemployment compensation, that is a transfer payment, and we see an increase in transfer payments. That is a normal thing to happen during any recession. Anytime output is falling and people are out of work, we see an increase in transfer payments in the form of unemployment compensation. In today's United States, in the current state of the economy, this is happening right now. I mean, I'm speaking to you in May of 2020. Tomorrow is Jobs Friday. The unemployment rate is going to be all over the news. This is what's happening. People are applying for unemployment benefits. Those transfer payments are going up. All right, number 2E, part 2E. Identify the effect of the change in government transfer payments you identified in part D on the demand for loanable funds and real interest rate in MEC land. Okay, so we just said that there's going to be an increase in transfer payments. The government is spending more money. How can I connect that to the loanable funds market? Think back to the original prompt. We were told originally that the government had a balanced budget. So the budget balance was balanced. Spending was equal to tax revenue. Well, now we don't know that anything else has changed, but we know that transfer payments have gone up. So government's now spending more money. That means there is a deficit. The federal government, in this case, the government of MEC land, is running a budget deficit. If they have a deficit, they're borrowing money. This question is directing you to the demand for loanable funds and real interest rates. So what's going to happen here? Demand for loanable funds will increase. The government is borrowing money. Borrowers are on the demand curve. So with an increase in borrowing here, not because of interest rates, but because of some other factor, demand shifts to the right. I'm going to draw that graph just to check myself and check the work that I've done and make sure that I'm correct in my conclusions. But as a result of that rightward shift of the demand for loanable funds, real interest rates are also going to increase. This is an identify question. We don't have to explain. There's nothing there to explain. So simply put your answer and move on to the next. So part F. In the absence of any changes in fiscal monetary policy, in the long run, will the short run aggregate supply curve shift to the left, shift to the right, or remain unchanged as a result of the fall in consumer confidence? Explain. Okay, a couple things to keep in mind here. We've had a lot of changes in the course of this question. You might want to remind yourself where you are. This is what our initial aggregate demand, aggregate supply model would have looked like. That decrease in consumer confidence took us from full employment to a point below full employment, Y1, where we have a recessionary gap. That's where this question picks up. And it says, in the long run, what's going to happen to the short run aggregate supply curve? Well, what we need to know is, in the absence of any policy, with no stabilization policy coming to bring us back, you're going to have long run self-correction. That long run self-adjustment process is going to take place. And we need to know what that is and how to explain it. So since we're operating below full employment, SRAS is going to shift to the right. And that's going to take us back to full employment output. Now we have to explain, why is that going to happen? Nominal wages and other resource prices will fall. So that's about as simple an answer as we can give, and that's perfectly fine. That covers what we need to cover. Let's make sure we understand what that means. With output operating below full employment, with a recessionary gap, there are idle resources, including labor. Those resource prices are going to fall in the long run, and because of that decrease in resource prices, a decrease in production costs, we anticipate short-run aggregate supply shifting to the right, and that's how we self-correct and get back to full employment output. Okay, that's it. Those were the two questions you had yesterday. I hope that was helpful. I want to remind you that when you log on to AP Classroom, there are all kinds of practice questions there. I think those could be really, really helpful for you. You can go through and pick out which ones you want to do from which units and which topics, so you can focus on the topics you need to brush up on the most. You can check your own work with the scoring guidelines right there on AP Classroom. And again, I would encourage you to do that, because working your way through the logic is the best way I know to study this stuff. In addition, I want to remind you of the 5 steps you need to take to be ready for the exam. Make sure you've done that exam demo. Get a feel for exam day and what it's going to be like. Go through the checklist and make sure you have all the resources you need. Confirm your email address. Locate that e-ticket because you need that e-ticket to get in. And then on exam day, make sure you're checking in 30 minutes early. Tomorrow's our last day of AP Prep Week. It's our last day of AP Live, and we're going to assemble tomorrow to give you some additional exam day tips, just some really proven tips that we have kind of collected from the AP teacher community and want to pass along to you to, again, help you do your best, because that's what this is all about. You're putting in the effort. We want to reduce that anxiety and allow you to feel confident and prepared so you can give your best effort on exam day and get the credit that you deserve. And with that, I want to thank you again for watching. Thank you for your effort, and hope you tune in tomorrow. Have a great rest of the day.